This is Wildcat Country.
Larson tipped it. Love has it. Lewis slams it, and Arizona wins it.
The inside scoop on the Arizona Wildcats.
It's Gunnar Maldonado. He's got blockers. Touchdown, Arizona.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bear down.
Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and Happy New Year, my friend. Our first show of the new year, and well, we have some good things to talk about.
Is there a statute of limitations for how long you can say Happy New Year? Is it
yes.
First week? Or because if so, we're just outside that window. But
well, we haven't done a show about that since then.
If it were our second show this year, then probably it would be. But this is our first show 2025, and so yeah, I think that's fine.
All right, fair enough. Well, there are good things to talk about, and we have the rare two-guest show on this program.
Deluxe.
Professor Matt Moreno going to join us in segment number 2. And in segment number 3, a newcomer to Wildcat Country, Victor Yates, former Arizona football player who has been awesome, an awesome follow on X.
And a shout out to, I believe, and I'm sorry if I get it wrong, I think it's Wildcat Dave on X who actually suggested that we have Victor on. It's like, you know what? It's a good idea, and Victor is willing to join us. Very, very great, very gracious of him, and we're excited. The rare double. We used to do double guest shows all the time, and we found that kind of just like diving more into one guest for a show is a little bit better. But I think we've got two awesome guests, and it's a great way to kick off the new year, Eric.
All right, let's get going, Shane. Let's get right into it. Buy or sell. We'll do kind of an abbreviated buy or sell since we have an action-packed show here. Let's get right to it. Number one, Shane, I can own it. I was flat out wrong about men's basketball's tournament chances. I thought they were toast. I said it in previous weeks. I thought they were done. And then they go on the road and they beat 2 top 25 teams, and they're 3-0 in the Big 12. So after the weekend sweep, the Wildcats are closer to the top 25 than out of the tournament picture. Buy or sell?
I will always buy the opportunity to say that you were wrong, Eric Cohen.
Yes.
Especially because you're doing so well in our college football playoff picks, which we'll get to at the end of the show. But yeah, no, even beyond that reason, I'll buy it. Yeah, sure. If they beat UCF on Saturday, which they better, UCF just beat Colorado by a point, not very impressive. Then Arizona might be ranked as soon as next week. They got some votes in this week's poll. My favorite sequence of the entire season so far came when against West Virginia, when West Virginia went on that super fast run early in the second half. And all of a sudden it was a 5-point game, crowds going crazy. I know it wasn't a full house because they had their snowstorm, but still, I'm sure it was still loud in there. All of a sudden it's a close game, and we're thinking, here we go again. And then Arizona responded with a ton of poise and maturity. Tommy Lloyd said after the game, he told the team, just breathe at that moment. They quickly methodically built the lead back up to 15 points in short order. Like if you would have walked away from the TV for a few minutes, you would have thought Arizona just maintained their lead. They got it back just like that. And I especially liked, Eric, that Arizona was able to do that with minimal contribution from Caleb Love, who I think was on the bench for a decent part of that run.
Yeah.
A couple weeks earlier, Arizona would have responded to West Virginia's run completely differently. Caleb Love probably would have tried to put the team on his back, play hero ball, which typically does not work out well for Arizona, and they would have lost the game. Instead, several guys, especially KJ Lewis, stepped up big. A lot of guys just not named Caleb Love played some disciplined but very aggressive basketball, methodically took control of the game right back. Caleb Love went 6 of 25 from the field against Cincinnati and West Virginia combined. Arizona won both games on the road against ranked opponents. That would not have happened last year, and that would not have happened last month. That's growth.
But Shane, that wouldn't have happened on Saturday because they had a big lead in Cincinnati and blew it. And where Cincinnati came back and tied the game. And I said, here we go again. This is UCLA all over. And I think the fact that they were able to come back in that game and win the game propelled them with that confidence going forward.
And that's why I think we were both concerned, Eric, about that loss to UCLA, because we thought that, that's the kind of loss that could really be demoralizing.
Yeah.
Because that sometimes there are certain games where it's kind of a crossroads, and that loss, we thought, okay, that might just be, a microcosm of how their season's going to go. But they sort of got a second chance. Arizona played 3 very good halves of basketball on that road trip. And the one they didn't, they survive. Somehow, some way they survived. They got it done. Jaden Bradley was aggressive, scored the game-winning layup and put Arizona back ahead and kind of calmed things down. They hit enough free throws down the stretch, made enough plays defensively. And so they found a way to win, and hopefully that's going to slingshot them into bigger and better things. And I think it's already started against West Virginia. They're without the coach's son who torched Arizona in overtime or in the whole game, including overtime in the Bahamas. But West Virginia was still on a 7-game winning streak. They were undefeated at home. So was Cincinnati. And so, they look every bit a tournament team right now, and the maturation we've seen throughout the lineup, including the 3 guys coming off the bench right now, is the difference between their 4 and 5 start and their current 5-game winning streak.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And let's talk about that bench. Does Tommy Lloyd have it right, Shane, with who he's starting, his starting 5?
I'm a pretty simple guy. If it's working, keep doing it. Is Del Orso one of the 5 best players on this team? Probably not.
Is Trey Townsend one of the 5 best players?
I was just going to say Townsend might not be either. No. But they're clicking right now, and I'd leave it alone until that changes. I mean, you're just looking at the 5 best. You'd put KJ Lewis in there, and then maybe Carter Bryant as well. But Henry Vesar is getting there. He's still a little. He's got a little work to do in terms of just sloppy play, foul here, and a turnover there. But he's light years better than he was a couple of years ago. But I don't know if the order really matters right now. They have 8 guys, like 1 through 8. There's not much of a drop off. There's not like when they go to their bench, it's not like they're okay. We just got to hold on until we get the starters back, and it's not like how it is at all. And I kind of like that. And Arizona will hit some rough spots again down the road, and maybe as soon as next week. I mean, they've got 17 games left in the Big 12 and then the conference tournament. They're going to lose some more games. My bold prediction is they will not go 20-0 in the Big 12, and so maybe at that time you tinker. But I'm a simple guy. If as long as it's working, you roll with it.
I think so too. I want to see Tommy Lloyd play his best guys, and I will tell you what, if I see, no offense to Conrad Martinez, who's a fantastic distributor of the basketball, he and Del Orso are defensive liabilities. When they are on the court at the same time, it does not work. He needs to get the hint. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say I'll give credit to Del Orso though, because he got hurt early in the second half, ran into a chair on the baseline there at West Virginia. But when West Virginia cut the lead to 5, he came back in the game, hit a big 3, quieted the crowd, and that's what really got Arizona's run going, and they were able to back up the lead. So I think that's what we want Del Orso to be. And realistically, I mean, he was never going to be a 20-point-a-game guy at Arizona like he was at Campbell. But if he's a guy who can come in and hit some big shots, change the momentum of the game, or boost a big scoring run that Arizona's already got going, then I think that's a great role for him.
Tommy Lloyd needs to fix starting Carter Bryant out on the bench. He needs to start him and put Trey Townsend on the bench. I mean, if you're going to bring KJ Lewis and Vesar as kind of the sparks off the bench, Trey Townsend should not be starting for Arizona.
Maybe. Yeah, but I think also Tommy Lloyd, and we've seen this already, a lot of times he'll go with guys at the end of games and even most of the second half who aren't starting. Remember last year, Jaden Bradley typically finished games with Kylan Boswell on the bench. So that's nothing new. I don't know how much that matters, and I feel like it doesn't matter until they start losing.
All right, there are 17 games left in the regular season in the Big 12. We said last week Arizona 13-7 probably gets them in the tournament. They're already 3-0. So at this point, you just have to win probably 10 of 17. The Wildcats, just kind of looking at it on paper, should be favored in, let's say, 12 of them. Do you still agree? Is 10 the number that we need to target here?
Yeah, I think get to 20 wins and they should be good. I mean, look, they're number 13 in KenPom and number 14 in net. That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's 2 different metrics that give them a lot of credit for not only playing good teams, but now having a couple of wins against good teams. You look at teams, I mean, UCLA's in the top 25. Oklahoma, who they lost to, a very close game in the Bahamas is legitimately good. So that helps. That kind of stuff helps. But yeah, for that, to get to 20, that would mean, for example, going 10-7 the rest of the regular season and then winning a game in the Big 12 tournament. That should do it. Totally doable. They have a couple of quad one wins to build on. And just, you mentioned Arizona should be favored in 10 to 12 of those 17 games. I think that sounds about right. If you go by ESPN's matchup predictor, Arizona is currently favored to win 12 of those 17.
Okay.
So just looking at the rest of the month, they might be a slight underdog at Texas Tech, maybe at home against Iowa State, which is shaping up to be a massive game. But if you're just looking at who's going to be favored, they're probably going to be favored. Yeah, 10 to 12. And as of right now, ESPN says they're the favorite in 12, and they're never wrong.
All right, let's make a couple of picks going in. Of course not. Going in this week, we've got UCF at Arizona on Saturday. We got Baylor at Arizona on Tuesday, a late 9 o'clock start Tuesday. Absolutely hate that for game.
Yeah.
Give me your predictions for both those games. Will the Wildcats sweep? You're up 4-1 on me in basketball picks this year. I can't get it right. You have more of a beat on this team.
Well, so far so good. They'll beat UCF. The Baylor game I think will be a lot more interesting. That's not a bold prediction by any means. Baylor just dropped out of the top 25 after getting beat soundly at Iowa State, but they just beat Cincinnati at home by 20 the other night. So Baylor has one of the best offenses in the country, number 13 in adjusted offense in Ken Palm. I think that's the kind of game that could be a shootout. At this point, I'm trusting Arizona's finally emerged as a team that we expected them to be this season, and that type of team is very difficult to beat at McHale. So I'll take Arizona to go 2-0. If you're looking for because we don't really know the spread yet, I'll say they beat UCF by, let's say, 18 points.
Okay.
I think the Baylor game is going to be a little too close for comfort. I'm guessing they're going to be favored somewhere in the 5 to 7 point range. I'm not going to take them to cover that. I'm going to take Arizona by 3 in a very close game.
All right, so you're going Arizona by 18, Arizona by 3. I'm going Arizona by 11 against UCF, just because Wildcats tend to give up these runs, and I'm not sure that there might be a hangover from the West Virginia game, but I think they'll be jacked up for Baylor. That game is going to be nip and tuck throughout. Arizona by 4. And I think so you and I are fairly close on that.
Pretty close.
Going with the sweep. I've been wrong a lot this year when it comes to this basketball team. I literally can't pick their games right. So let's hope that this is the week where we can get a sweep here, and we can both kind of agree with that. Since we have an action-packed show, we're going to have Matt Moreno on coming up next with us. Talk about Bryce James. So on January 1st, Bryce James committed to Arizona. The circus will be in town. Do you like this? Like, this is a good move for Arizona, buy or sell.
Yeah, when I posted the circus coming to Tucson on X, a lot of people didn't care for that. But let's start with this. And this is obvious, but we can talk about it. If this was not LeBron James's son, would Arizona fans be impressed with this signing or with this commitment? No. He's not a nationally ranked recruit according to Rivals, and he's the 50th ranked shooting guard in the country. Doesn't mean he can't be great. I mean, Derek Williams was a 3-star recruit as well, but it's just start with the obvious that he would very likely not be headed to Arizona if he was not the son of the king. With that said, is there a significant downside to it or a downside at all? Not really. Although some of the things fans and the media have said, like it'll help with recruiting, it'll help boost the program's brand. Someone said it'll help boost home attendance. Obviously, the latter is not an issue. I don't think the other things are issues either. And it's not like, Bronny did wonders for USC, although that's a bit of an unfair comparison since he had the medical issue and didn't play most of his one and only season there. But LeBron, I mean, him being at games, it's going to be mostly a positive thing. I just don't know if it's as big a deal as a lot of fans think it might be. Is he going up with his, help, bring in some revenue to Arizona's athletics department, the NIL fund, probably. So that, especially now in that situation, is probably a bigger deal from that regard. So that has to be an appealing prospect. So I wasn't as thrilled about it. I looked at that. I'm like, okay. I mean, Arizona, as long as they have more scholarships available to guys who are more likely to play right away, which they probably will. I think they have 2 open scholarships at the moment. Then it's fine. It's probably going to be a good thing. I just hope it doesn't become too big a distraction.
Here's what it comes down to with the Bryce James move. Who does he bring with him? He's friends with all these top guys. I mean, we're going to talk to Moreno about that.
Yeah.
Who's he bring with him? If it's Bryce James on his own, this does nothing. If Bryce James can bring Koa Pete or Braden Burries or Elijah Arenas or a combination of those guys, then we're on to something. And that's what it comes to. It's very simple. That's what it comes down to. Other than that, and the exposure of LeBron, tweeting and saying stuff in the mirror, great, or whatever, Instagramming, whatever, like that's great.
Yeah. No, it would be, it would be cool because I know Kevin Durant's at some games in Tucson every so often. If he and LeBron are at games together, I mean that sitting in the front row.
We'll see how long Kevin Durant's on the Suns.
Well, that's a whole other issue, right? Yeah, but I had a thought as well. If I think Arizona football could obviously use that kind of a PR boost more than the basketball team could. Like when Bill Belichick came to campus and wore the U of A hat when Jed Fish was there. I mean, that was great exposure for the program.
Yeah.
And if Tom Brady had a son who committed to play for the football team, I would love it and not care how much playing time the kid actually got. It'd be a great branding and marketing opportunity for the program. So I question how much real added value there's going to be. And again, I think if he was not the son of LeBron James, he probably wouldn't be playing at Arizona. But LeBron said some very nice things about Tommy Lloyd, and he generally seems like Lloyd is the kind of guy who could coach up his son to improve. And so I get the gamble. It's not that big a gamble, but I get the move from a strategic standpoint, whether he plays much or not. I'm just not as thrilled about it as I know a lot of Arizona fans are.
Fair enough. Okay, that makes sense. All right, I always want to remind you, we are very happy to have, once again, in 2025, our main sponsor, Harrah's Auction Casino. Bear down, Wildcat fans, because it's time to spin to win up to $6,000 at Harrah's Auction Casino. It's easy to sign up for Caesars Rewards, play your favorite slots, and earn entries to spin the wheel for your chance to win up to $6,000 in free slot play. What's even better, you'll get $10 in free slot play just for signing up. And the more you play, the more entries you will receive. So get ready to spin to win only at Harrah's Auction Casino. Play for all. We'll have our buddy Mike Kintner on with us in the coming weeks to talk Arizona basketball. Nice that they've turned things around. Hopefully they keep it going, Shane.
2025 is already better than 2024, is it not?
Yes, it's nice to start on a winning note. Well, I don't think we're going to have any coaches leave in early January like we saw last time. Now, the women's team made a comeback tonight as we're recording this against Baylor, and they fell in overtime.
Yeah.
Nice comeback. I think they were down 13 at halftime and something like that, and got it to overtime, but just fell short. But
we got a ranked baseball team, the highest ranked baseball team in the Big 12 going into the season. Men's tennis is ranked in the top 10. So we got some stuff to look forward to. The softball team's got some players ranked in the freshman top 100 list. So a lot of good stuff to look forward to.
Couple of guests coming up. First, we have the Professor Matt Moreno, and then Victor Yates makes his debut on Wildcat Country. All right, Shane, you know what time it is. I have the pen in my hand. Class is in session with the professor, as I like to call him, Matt Moreno from Rivals.com. There you go. You have your pen as well, Shane. I'm proud of you. All right, Matt, we're having you on. First show of the new year. And the reason we're doing so, especially this time, usually it's football, and we'll get into that. Bryce James commits to Arizona. Let's talk about him as a player before we get to the sideshow. Your thoughts, is this an impact player for Arizona or more of a role player down the road?
I'm more of a role player. I don't think there's any uncertainty about what he is and what they're getting at this point in time. I think everybody understands that he's somebody that is going to need some development and is going to need, I think most people do. Maybe some Arizona fans don't, but I think for most people, they understand that this is a player who's going to need some development, and it's going to take him time. And yes, he has the great genes, and obviously that holds a lot of weight, but you have to kind of realize that at some point. And I think there's a ton of potential. I think he's got, obviously the size, but the background and the genetics to be a really, really good basketball player. It's not happened yet. He's not, a guy that you're going to be bringing in next year and being like, he's going to be a starter. I think it's going to take him some time to really come around. So that was the one thing that I tried to make clear to, people on our message boards and kind of everywhere, that like, you have to be patient, and he's going to need time. That's the reality of the situation. I know there's been people kind of throwing things out because of his name, and people I know there was a report of like, hey, well, he doesn't even start on his high school team. Like, and this guy's going to Arizona. Like, it is what it is. And I've watched him play quite a bit, and there's some talent there. There's potential there. And so, it's going to have to be realized. I mean, that's the thing, is like, if he is, at the end of his Arizona career, what he is right now, people are going to, I think, be underwhelmed by what Bryce James, is as a player. But if he's able to have some real growth, and I don't think Arizona takes him unless it thinks it can develop him into a really talented player, somebody that can be a contributor at Arizona. And so they're not in the business of taking players just to take players. That's not, what Arizona is about. That's not what Tommy Lloyd is about. And so I think there's a reason to be optimistic that he could eventually down the line be somebody who contributes to the team. And I think that's kind of the way you have to approach it, is if you give him time, if you're not expecting to be LeBron James in year one, in game one as a freshman, I think he'll be, more than what people think.
Matt, how does Bryce's game compare to Bronny's?
It's similar in some ways. I think there's some maybe some different level of athleticism, I think, with him. And um, you look at him and you go like, oh, he's a little like he seems bigger than he seems more like a LeBron type, not necessarily in game, but just in body type and kind of when you look at him, you're like, okay, that's more of like what you think of as LeBron's son. And so um, I think there's some good athleticism there. I think he can shoot a little bit. Um, Again, there's just you have to see more from him, and that's the thing is like, uh, he kind of settles for some shots sometimes, gets into positions where he's just not necessarily as aggressive as he should be, and so I think there's some different elements there that are going to have to kind of come into play, but I think the athleticism is the thing that stands out to me.
Yeah, I know a lot of fans, Matt, are excited about the LeBron factor, the intangibles as far well not intangibles completely, but just as far as boosting the name the brand recognition that LeBron might bring with Arizona. And my thought is, well, Arizona basketball, it's not Arizona football. The brand recognition's there, it's strong. They don't have a problem filling seats. Do you think there's an added benefit away aside from Bryce's potential game on the court to bringing him on, considering that he's a 3-star, maybe a high end 3-star recruit?
That's the biggest benefit right now. I mean, the biggest benefit is that you get the name recognition, and if you're competing right now with programs that have unlimited NIL money or seemingly unlimited NIL money, why would you not want to tap into a guy who's got his hands kind of in everything, and a family that's got its hands in every different kind of walk of life, and the people they may know that could bring money to your program, and the players who now want to play with Bryce James because they understand that his dad is LeBron James, and that attracts recruits. Like that is the biggest upside to this whole thing is that you get everything that comes with Bryce James and the James name, in that his dad's probably going to be at Arizona games from time to time, probably going to be hanging out in Tucson from time to time. There's again unlimited, kind of almost unlimited resources in terms of his connections to different people in different walks of life. And so I don't think there's any downside from in that way. And I think it's all positive. And I think that's a big part of, what is appealing about someone like Bryce James becoming part of your program, because there is just going to be a spotlight on your team. And yes, you can say that the brand is the brand, but times are changing and it's all about marketing. It's all about branding. It's all about NIL money. And, you can't just be like, hey, we've done a lot on the basketball court and be like, that's what we're selling. Like there has to be something else in this day and age. And for Arizona, this could be that. And so, in that regard, I don't think there's any downside. I think it is the biggest plus for adding someone like Bryce James to the program. And I think that it's going to open up some doors for Arizona that maybe wouldn't have been opened otherwise.
All right, Matt. So now we have Bryce James on board. You have, I think, Aristode as well, who's a four-star, 5-star in that range. Let's talk about the other parts of this class. Koa Pete is highly ranked, top 10 guy. You've got Braden Burries, who's in consideration, and then you have Elijah Arenas, who may reclassify. How many of those guys, in your opinion, are realistic for Arizona, and what is your gut feeling today?
I think all three are realistic. I mean, I think if you're just asking, like, could they get all three? Sure. I don't think there's any reason to believe they couldn't. I don't think they will. I think that things will kind of work out, where they maybe get two of the three. I'd say right now, based on what you're asking me at this point in time, I'd say they probably get two of the three. Is it possible that they only get one of the three? Sure. There's just so many things that change in this day and age. Again, there's just somebody comes through with a different offer, a visit, changes some things and influences a decision in a different way. But I think if you look at, kind of a common theme with all three of those guys, and you look at, well, what program kind of is consistent between all three, it really is Arizona. And there's different reasons for why Arizona's involved. Obviously with Elijah, you have the direct connection, family connection. With Koa, you obviously have the in-state connection, and Arizona's been recruiting him since he's really came onto the scene as like a junior high player. And then Braden Burries, his best friend is Carter Bryant, and he's on the team. And so I think that there's kind of a lot of different connections to Arizona with all three guys in different ways that is going to have Arizona in the mix until the end of those recruitments. As we've seen, some guys can be locks for Arizona, and at the 11th hour, things change. And that is the difficulty. And I know every fan wants to know, like, well, today, who are they getting? It's like, I can tell you who I think they're getting today, but that could change an hour from now. By the time this gets posted, that could change. So it's too difficult to say, yes, they're going to get this guy. And I know that's fans don't like to hear that. They live in absolutes. Fans live in absolutes. They're just as not absolutes in recruiting in 2025 with all the things that are in play. There are no absolutes until papers are signed, really till players are on campus. And so I feel pretty good that they can pull out two of those three. I think you'd be overjoyed if you can get all three. I don't think it's out of the question they could get all three. I think all three could play together. I think they're different enough players that it could work. I think that's the goal. I think that's the dream and the vision is like you can have all three of those guys and you add on to what you already have. And then Bryce James is just part of a class that's really, really elite. And then, obviously that's just another like great piece to have in your class that's really, really good. And so I think that's the vision for Arizona. But I would say Koa Pete probably feels like the most likely at this point. Obviously he played in Tucson recently, and there's always kind of attention on him from people in Tucson, but Arizona's been involved with him for so long. Going back to kind of the early stages, it always felt like when you talk to people behind the scenes and talk to people about his recruitment, he keeps it very, very close to the vest. Not a lot of people know what's going on with Koa Pete when it comes to his recruitment. People can tell you, people involved don't really even know what's going on with Koa Pete's recruitment other than like what is being said. And so, but when you do get some kind of peek into what's going on with him, even going back to the early stages when he was a freshman and early on in his high school career was like, he's probably going to Arizona. Like that's the feeling, the kind of baseline is like he's going to Arizona. And then you have to kind of see, okay, what are these other, does Baylor come in and get involved a little bit more? Does maybe ASU potentially, is that like a wild card that's out there? Like you got to kind of sort through all this stuff. And that's kind of what's been going on over the years. It feels like different teams, whether, Texas is in there as well, like different programs that get involved and you're like, okay, maybe they're taking a little bit of an edge, but kind of what I alluded to earlier, you look at like, well, who's been in there the longest, who's stayed consistent throughout this whole thing. It always kind of comes back to Arizona. And so I would say Koa Pete's probably the favorite of that group to land at Arizona. There was a time where Braden Burries, it felt like it was only a matter of time until he ended up committed to Arizona. It's obviously taken a different path, and there's a thought about him reclassifying at one point and potentially being on campus right now and being a part of this team, that's on the floor for Arizona this year, but that didn't happen. I think if that would have happened, I think he would be at Arizona. If he would have reclassified, I feel like very strongly he would have been at Arizona. I don't think it's bad that he didn't reclassify, and that means he's not going to be at Arizona in the future, but I think it definitely becomes a little bit more challenging. Elijah Arenas is kind of the wild card. I mean, obviously recently reclassified, kind of is setting his recruitment into hyperdrive a little bit, has to speed it up a little bit just to kind of figure out what he's going to do. There's going to be a lot of people pulling him in different directions, but that's kind of the wild card. I think Arizona's in a good position. I think we all know that there's clearly a connection there to Tucson, to the Wildcats, that I think is only going to benefit, Arizona as they push forward here. But there's a lot of different elements in play with someone like Elijah. And so I think that's one of the ones that's kind of a wild card that right now I'd probably feel least confident in, but maybe not. I mean, it's just a really interesting with basketball recruiting and kind of how it goes. And especially in this day and age. And so, I think that would be kind of my list right now, just based on kind of how things have come together. But again, it wouldn't shock me if all three end up at Arizona. And I think that'd be, Arizona fans will feel very, very excited about that.
Now, that was as thorough a breakdown as you're going to find anywhere about Arizona's recruiting situation. So great job as always. Want to transition to football here for a second. Just your thoughts, general thoughts. Do you think the Wildcats have done a decent job kind of rebuilding the mass exodus that we've seen?
Absolutely. I think that, one of the things you have to do is just simply add bodies and get players to fill the roles and the gaps that you kind of lost through the portal. But they feel like they are gaining some momentum, which is good. You don't want to be stagnant. You want to kind of continue building momentum. And I think the last time we talked, we had discussed maybe some of the guys that they had added. And I said there's maybe some question marks. I feel like there's fewer of those are coming up now as they kind of build here towards the start of the semester, which is really kind of the cutoff point for a lot of these guys who entered the portal already because they want to get in, and be on campus already for the spring semester and be able to participate in spring ball. So there will be a couple stragglers, I think, that, already entered and they're going to still wait out the process and they're going to finish up, their degree at their previous school and kind of let it play out a little bit more before they decide. But for the most part, the transfer class is being built right now and it'll be, these next few days before the start of the semester will be kind of when it all kind of comes to a head. But I feel like right now, if you're an Arizona fan, you look at kind of what they're doing, it feels like they're still moving upward, which I think we talked about last time as being really, really important. And, as long as you're kind of taking steps forward and not taking steps back and not losing too much, I think you'll be fine. And it feels like Arizona has really identified what it wants. I think, and we've talked about this before, but just highly productive guys that really fit what they want to do schematically, I think is the thing that stood out to me the most is like maybe they're not for everyone, but they do feel like a fit for what this staff wants to do, maybe even in particular offensively. And so, and then I think in particular defensively at linebacker, it feels like there's been some real key additions where guys are like, no, they really fit what we believe that Arizona's going to try and do, as they kind of shift things on the defensive side. But production has been really important, I think, to what Arizona's done in terms of adding transfers. Speed and ability to just make plays seems to be the really big thing with the receivers and the skill position guys. Like guys who are fast and guys who can just make plays. And that's a very broad sense, but if you look at some of these players and look at what the guys that they're adding, you go, man, there's playmakers. And I think it's kind of hard to quantify that, I guess. But yeah, it's one of those things that stands out to me is like they're really adding some guys who are gonna rack up stats and on both sides of the ball and guys that are just gonna make plays. And so it's so hard to tell, and I will always say this, and I think I have said this to you guys before, just it's there is some luck involved here. It's a process that has to happen so quickly. You can't learn everything there is to know about these guys, and when they're in a certain situation, how are they going to react? There's only so much film you can watch in a short amount of time because guys are making decisions so fast. Some of these guys were entering the portal like 2 weeks ago or something like that, and with some of the guys that are like CFP guys, not that Arizona has landed those guys, but they're still entering the portal, and so it has to be fast. It's a fast process, and so you can't learn everything that there is to know about all these players until you actually get them on the field and get them in your own system and maybe even see them in games, to be honest. And so I think that there is a little bit of luck involved, and there is a little bit of a question mark for kind of everyone for the most part that you're bringing in. But I think when you look at just face value and what they're doing and who they're adding, it feels like it's been, a really productive offseason. And it's a challenge because, everyone kind of made fun of Colorado. I was included in that when they were like, we're going to flip like half our roster and we're just like, you're going to see a ton of guys leave and we're going to add a bunch of guys. And that's just going to be how we do things every offseason. They were able to turn into quite a few wins. And I think more than ever, you kind of have to throw out the conventional wisdom and the conventional ways of how you build a roster because it can change so quickly. And it feels like Arizona's kind of going through one of those processes right now where they lost a lot of guys, but you look at the roster right now and you look at the group, that they're bringing in, you're like, it's kind of impressive. And there's a lot of playmakers in that group. And so I think it's a long-winded way of saying I do think that they've made improvements and it feels like they're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, and we've learned nothing else. Brent Brennan is a great relationships guy, so I'm not surprised by his success in the portal and the staff's success so far. Let me go back, Matt. One more question regarding Bryce James. You mentioned guys possibly changing their mind last minute. Obviously, we saw as soon as Caleb Love decided he was coming back, Joe Sonson heads up the I-10 to ASU. Any chance Bryce James may? I mean, I know there's always a chance, but I guess what are the chances Bryce James decides to change his mind?
Yeah, I guess there's always the chance. I think with someone like him, there's such a force behind everything that's done within the James family, and no decision is usually made without a lot of thought and a lot of like, hey, what comes next and how do we approach this situation? I think it's going to be very different and has been very different than your typical recruitment. Bronny was similar. Not a lot of people knew what was going on with Bronny. It was like we kind of think we know the schools and what could happen, but we don't know. This was a little bit more clear cut. I think Arizona felt like it was always going to be the landing spot, especially when he made it out for a visit and things started to kind of line up a little bit more. But if there's something, I covered a little bit of Bronny and kind of was around that situation a little bit through his high school days. And if there's one thing you kind of know and learn about them is like the family is that there's a point to everything they do. And so I don't think this decision was made like going like, oh, well, if he feels differently about a program, he's going to change. I think there's a lot of thought, a lot of discussions put into making this happen, going public with this and being like, hey, this is where Bryce is going to go. So I think because of all those things, it's just different than a normal recruitment. Yes, he's still, a teenager and still could change his mind for whatever reason, but it feels like, much like Arch Manning, like that's an entity. The Manning family is an entity. When you're talking about these types of recruitments and these types of players, like there's a lot more going on behind the scenes and a lot more thought being put into decisions than just, hey, a high school player deciding where he wants to go to school. And so because of that, I would say that it's probably less likely that he ends up going anywhere else, and feels pretty firm at this point.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, LeBron James posting BTFD on Instagram is just as good as an LOI. But
there you go.
But that
it's binding.
Yeah, that's right. Last question for you, Matt. Appreciate your time as always. Seth Dagey was hired since the last time we chatted with you. Your thoughts on him, and do you think he's a good fit specifically with Noah Fifita?
Yeah, it really feels like that's gonna be a really good marriage. I think that you look at kind of who they're recruiting and who they're targeting. It kind of fits the Noah Fifita mold at quarterback. And I think, kind of mentioning some of those other transfers that they brought in, I think those guys really fit the system as well. I think the one thing that you're going to really see them do is pass the ball a lot. I think that's when you talk to players that they're recruiting, when you talk to players that have committed, on offense, it's like they're going to throw the ball and they're going to pass it around a lot. And I think there's an excitement level about what he brings to the table. He has a lot of connections. And I think you saw that kind of pay off right away. And so, obviously he spent some time at USC. And so he kind of he's not, the West is not foreign to him. It's one of those things where it's like he can head out to a school in California, Arizona, wherever on the West Coast and feel like, all right, I know what I'm doing. I know kind of the landscape of what I'm stepping into. And I think that's big because, a large portion of the staff outside of him is, Bay Area, California guys, West Coast guys. And so, I think that's important. And again, just systematically, I think it really fits Noah Fifita pretty well. I think we'll really kind of, once things kind of settle down, you really figure out what the roster is going to look like. I think you're going to see a roster that really fits with what he wants to do offensively. And that's kind of going back to my earlier point of like, I think they're really targeting guys that maybe not everybody sees what they see or, looks for what they're looking for. But I think they really like, the guys that they're adding and, at every position, but especially at quarterback, I think it really fits what they want to do. And even, some of the guys they're targeting at quarterback and they're brought in at quarterback, it's like, oh, they put up numbers and they're like, they pass the ball, they can sling it kind of everywhere. And that really fits kind of, Noah Fifita when he's been at his best. And I think it really fits kind of what they want to do overall.
My last question for you, Professor. So last week on the show, Shane asked, were we talking about bold predictions for 2025? I came out and said, I can see Arizona going 6-6 and making a bowl game next year. Call me crazy. What do you think? Am I onto something, or does this team have a long way to go?
I think they have a long way to go, but I think I said it last year. If you have a quarterback that's coming back, obviously kind of backfire on me, but if you have a quarterback that's coming back, that says a lot. I mean, that does a lot for your team. There's so many programs. It doesn't do everything. There's teams that are playing still, and went deep into the college football playoff that have quarterbacks that, weren't on the team last year. But for the most part, if you look at teams that are successful and, when you're trying to rebuild a team in the course of an offseason, like you need some kind of stability because you can't be switching everybody. If you have a quarterback that's coming back and kind of understands what you want to do, yes, it's going to be a new offensive coordinator, presumably a new kind of game plan, playbook, all those types of things. But there's some familiarity there at least. And I think having a quarterback like that will do a lot. And so, I think there are some question marks still. I think there's some guys that you still need to kind of see what they can do. And I don't know that there's a ton of reaches in terms of the guys that they're bringing in, but just guys that kind of probably need to play better than what they did at their last stops or just continue to play like they did at their last stops. And we'll see if that happens, but especially for some of those guys that are moving up a level, but I could buy into that. I could buy a 6-6 season. I don't think it's absurd to think that they can make that improvement. Getting back to 10 wins probably a little bit more absurd because you just don't know what you have, and it's just not. It doesn't feel like the same type of talent on this roster, but it does feel better, and it does feel like they are headed in the right direction. And we'll kind of see what that looks like once they hit the field. But I don't think it's absurd. I don't think you're like crazy for going out there and saying that they can make a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we saw ASU turn it around in Kenny Dillingham's second year. I mean, I don't think Arizona has a Cam Scadaboo on the roster, but remember, this is a first-year quarterback in Sam Levitt who had never started full-time, and they go and takes him to the college football playoff. And honestly, they probably should be playing this weekend still. But hey, that's for another day. But Matt, as always, thank you for coming on with Shane and I. Great intel, and I'm sure that we'll talk to you in the next 4 to 6 weeks as per usual.
Sounds good. Anytime, guys.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Shane, it's time for the rare two-guest show, and we don't do these very often, but when we do, we have special guests. This is a guy that on X has been awesome. In the For You section, he kept showing up over and over and over again. I'm like, I gotta follow this guy. He's awesome. It's Victor Yates.
He's one of those guys that wears you down until you just got to give it and hit that follow button. Right?
I'm telling you what, and he's been a great follow. Victor Yates played for Arizona between 2006 and 2010, I believe. You were part of 5 Territorial Cup games. We have a lot to talk to you about.
Including my favorite 2008, which we'll get into. Yeah.
Which we'll get into. But I just want to ask you an overview. First of all, glad to have you on the show. Secondly, what do you think of everything that's going on with Arizona football right now? Are you happy or are you upset today?
Yeah, I think good question. That's a great question because I feel like some people there's a wave of emotions, and I would say for me, I'm happy. I think that it's headed in the right direction. I would put a little note in there that I'm not satisfied or content by any means, but I think definitely the program is heading in the right direction with the pickups that they've made so far with coaches and players.
All right, Victor, like Eric said, thanks for joining us on the show for the first time. I feel like I owe you an apology for not having you on sooner, but we appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
Let's get this out of the way because I know you spent 5 years at Arizona. You're a walk-on cornerback, but you also spent a little time up where we live at the school up north. Eric forwarded me an article from the Daily Star a few years back talking about how you kind of had your loyalty sort of split. Where do you stand right now on the rivalry?
Hey man, listen, it's always bear down first and foremost, baby.
Right answer.
Don't get it twisted. But I will also say, because people they just can't fathom what they can't fathom, right? So they're like, how did you go to the enemy? And I'm like, it's simple. My days of tackling people are long gone, and now I'm looking for an employer with my W-2. And the way that the story would go is that I was in Texas and I was engaged to my now wife and looking for my next gig, man. And the school up north, ASU, gave me the job the day before my wedding. And so I tell people I'm forever appreciative of that. They got good folks over there. But when it comes to the rivalry of head-to-head, it's always U of A, unless I'm employed by somebody else. Because also, oddly enough, I worked at UTSA. And I remember when I was at UTSA, people said, hey, you guys are playing Arizona. Are you going for Arizona? I'm like, listen, man, I'm employed by these people, man. Like, I am going to follow whoever is writing my check, and I'm going to support them because they're supporting me financially. But if it's all things in just fan mode, then I'm going to go back to my first love and who gave me an opportunity to play football, which was U of A. So bear down.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I wrote a book about the rivalry, and I did my best to be fair and balanced. Most ASU fans thought I was, but I think some U of A fans think I'm a traitor just for that. So I'm with you 100%, and I get your perspective. My wife's an ASU alum as well, so there's that.
Okay.
I got
Me
two strikes against me right there. Your thoughts on Seth Dagey joining the team as offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, and how do you think we had Matt Moreno on before you with Goazy Cats talking about it. I want to get your perspective on Seth Dagey and how do you think he's going to do coaching up Noah Fafita?
Yeah, I think, man, from what I've seen so far, I think it's a really good match. Obviously, BB did his homework of making sure that with Seth that they felt comfortable with Noah, and they have a little bit of history, which was also cool to hear. And I think just hearing them talk ball and what they want to do, I think, to be honest, I think for both of them, it's a big season, right? Like Seth's coming into this new role that all eyes are going to be on him, and Noah's coming back for this seemingly last hurrah if you will, and wanted to do some damage. And so I think those two should be a lethal combination, is what we are all hoping and expecting for the near future. But hearing Seth talk a little ball, I feel like the program's in the good hands. And some of the alums that I know that know Seth have also talked about that was a good hire. So feel good about it.
What do you think of Brent Brennan? Are you a fan? I mean, he's a great guy. We've
Yep.
met him.
Yeah.
We've had him on the show a couple times. Great guy. As far as a coach, are
Yep.
you a fan or are you still kind of on the fence?
Oh, I like that question. As a coach, I think that as a looking for the fan or the fence, the two F words, I'm going to say I'm a fan. But here's what I have to give him credit for: is people remember the previous coach, who I will not mention for the sensitivity of our listeners. They were upset that he was not loyal. He wasn't a family guy, right? And like that's what we all heard when he departed. And I'm like, man, listen, you got to give David Hinkie credit for hiring BB, because we got a family man. We got a loyal man. And so much so that when things were looking abysmal in the season and people were like, fire somebody, fire someone, he's like, listen, it's not what we wanted, but we're going to evaluate all things at the end of the season. We're going to wait and see. And I'm like, yo, you really going to wait? Like, no, make a move now. Like, I'm like, everyone wants you to make a move. And I have to give BB credit. This is what makes me fan of him. He was not budged. Now, could I say that's not putting you in the best favors of the fans? Probably. But we've seen at the end of the season, he made the necessary adjustments. And to his credit, at the same time, he opened up 3 coordinator spots, all 3. So it wasn't like he was like, hey, he was like, hey, we're going to open all 3 spots up, which I think is in line with what the fans wanted in terms of the future for Arizona. So I'm going to have to give him right now a fan as I look after season 1. Also, I think he had a tough draw, which this is from the football perspective. Anytime you have success with something and you bring in a new system, it's not going to be mirrored. And I think a lot of us saw that, and the student athletes saw that as well in terms of the season. So I hope with this upcoming season and him getting some of the guys that he's built rapport with and having a head start on the recruiting process, that we'll see more favorable victories in 2025.
So you played for Mike Stoops, who has quite a different personality from what we've seen under Jed Fish, and I said his name, and Brent Brennan.
Just don't say the name of the coach before Jed.
Yeah, we'll leave that guy. We like Rich Rod. He's a few back. Just your thoughts. Do you respond as a player? Do you respond better to coaching like Brent Brennan gives it, or did you like the way that Mike Stoops was fiery and motivated all of you guys at the time?
Yeah, I would say, me personally, I like the fiery and motivating, but I will tell you that on a coaching staff, so just because you don't see it does not mean it's not happening, right? So I think so oftentimes head coaches can get the bad rap of like, oh, I need to see you in his face, or da da da. And for BB and his staff, I'm like, I mean, if you watch the sidelines, those coaches are in those spaces, but people are looking at BB because he's sort of like, I don't want to say Ned Flanders, but I'm going to say a Ned Flanders type vibe of like just poised, cool, and relaxed. And people are like, how are you? Man, we're losing by 30. Like, grab somebody's helmet, yell at somebody, gee whiz, like, give us something, and that's not him. To which I will say I respect, because he believes, to my knowledge, that he's got guys in the right spot to handle that for what they need to do in terms of yelling, and that's not his vibe. So,
Well, the perception, I think, is like, like a guy like Rich Rodriguez who's very fiery as well. Like when you're winning, he's fiery. He's got passion. When you're losing, he's crazy. He's unhinged, right? So it's all a matter of perspective.
Yes, and to your point, I say this all the time about Stoops. The thing that I felt like was the greatest shame for him was he didn't have a high emotional intelligence. So, and I say that with all due respect to my guy, is, hey, when people start complaining about your antics on the sideline, and it's now like a thing where the fan base is complaining about it, adjust, right? Like adjust. And he didn't want to do that. So to your point, along with the losses, But what they said about him in terms of in his tenure was, this is just embarrassing for the university. And I'm like, man, what's embarrassing about going back to back to back bowl games? The first time in program history. And so, to your point, you got to have a little bit of diplomacy in that head coach's role and understand what's firing up your fan base and what's also pissing them off.
And you were part of the rebuild with Mike Stoops, and the program that took a while to turn the corner, but they finally did. I know Arizona fans were hoping it wouldn't be the case with Brent Brennan coming in, but now we're definitely looking into rebuild. What were some of the key components? I mean, obviously you got to bring talented guys in, but beyond that, what were some of the key components to Mike Stoops and his staff methodically building the team from a sub 500 team to a team that finished second place in 2009 in the Pac-10?
Yep. I would say one thing that is, and we saw with the previous regime, and we're going to see with this one, is the strength and conditioning. And I know that was a point of contention with a lot of people, but I'm like, listen, our strength coach was top tier, and I know that with the last strength coach, he was top tier. The guy from Alabama, right, just right under. And like, I watched him, I interacted with him, and I was thoroughly impressed. And so when you talk about the results on the field, oftentimes it actually does come in the offseason, right? Because we've got 4 months of a football season. If some people are lucky, maybe 5, right, where they're playing in January.
Yeah.
But it's 4 months, man. 8 months is twice the amount of that. And that's where you're going to grow these guys and get them in the right positions. And so that is super vital to the growth of the program. And we had a guy, Corey Edmond and Mark Hill, that were top tier. And then also Brian Odom, who's now he's since stepped out of the strength and conditioning department and got into actual position coaching. But those dudes were elite and they knew their stuff. And so I think when you talk about rebuild, that is the biggest thing, because guys weren't used to it. Like, I can remember some of the workouts we did were like, this was do you love football type of workouts.
Yeah.
But when it got to the season, it just made things so much easier, because you knew the guys in those foxholes were about this life in terms of giving it all they could to football. And so I think that was huge. And then also the camaraderie of, like you were saying or alluding to, is those X's and O's, right? Putting guys in position to use their athleticism at a high level to where it's going to be advantageous to helping the football team.
All right. So as far as what my last question, then we'll get into making some picks for this week's college football playoff. What does Arizona need to do in 2025 to turn this thing around and get to a bowl game? Now, I want to preface that with saying that we talked to Matt Moreno about this last segment. I asked him about this on last week's show. I said to Shane, I could see there's a lot of new pieces here, but I could see Arizona going 6-6 and making a bowl game, depending on what the schedule looks like. In your opinion, what needs to happen for the Wildcats to do that?
Yeah, I think it starts off with the non-conference, right? So handling business there. What the product that we put on the field last year, I think for coaches, and coaches know this too, you try to go 3-0 because you know conference is going to be a doozy, right? And to your point, when you're talking about the 6-6, I think of, hey man, if you can start the season out 3-0, you know that you've got three home games that are going to have you in it, right? Have you in it. And one of those other 3, you're probably going to lose just because of the craziness. But you get 2 of those, and then you're talking about 1 game on the road. That's how you get to 6, right? Like that. And that's why, and I mean, you can even look at, like you said, when we finished second in the pack, you look at some of those years, man. Second in the pack, we were 3-0. We had a good start and then sort of got bumpy. But that's the most detrimental factor, I think, for a team, because you're building that belief of, hey, we know how to win. And then you're going to get into dogfights. I mean, look at Houston when they came to Arizona, right? And ended up getting basically blitzed, right, by a team that is struggling. And it's like, yeah. And I tell you this because those guys in Houston did not come in like, oh, Arizona can't play. Their coaches get paid a lot of money, and they're telling them, hey, Arizona is a trap game. They're coming, right? And then they get in there, and it's just – and so I say that for the program is, hey, to those 6 wins, I think the biggest thing, because we've seen a good uptick of the skill guys, I think it's really going to be on the offense, man. If we can get into a position where we were 2 years ago, where we're controlling things. I think 6-6 is actually like a conservative side of a pick because this year we didn't control much. I mean, with T-Mac and Noah, and we didn't have a good run game. If we can get what we think we are starting to build here for the coming year, I think you're looking at the variance of anywhere between 6 and as high as I would say 8.5, to be honest, just because when you think about what we did last year defensively, I thought they did a stellar job, but you don't get a good read on defenses when your offense is poo. That's just the reality of it, right? Because you're going either 6 and out or 3 and out most possessions, and that's what when I was at the Territorial Cup game, I'm like, man, I feel bad for these guys on defense, man, because I'm like, dude, there's not enough energy in your body to be able to fight with another team if they're going to do 3 and outs all day, and then you've got to go out here and try to put together stops. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, one thing kind of transitioning to the college football playoff here, one thing that we've seen with all 4 of these teams that are still left is they have elite defenses. I mean, you're talking about top 10 defenses. Ohio State's number 1, Texas is number 4, Notre Dame is in the top 10, and I think Penn State is on the fringe of top 10. Regardless of opponent, we saw that from Arizona in 2023. Let's see if they can take that step forward with all these new players coming up next year. All right, so let's get into picks. Shane, I think I've clinched it this year. I got an 8-point lead on you.
Yeah, unless you're going to make the national championship game where 10 points, Well, and just so you know, Victor, Eric is a professional. He's the people's capper, people's handicapper, and he does this for a living. And if I, who doesn't pay nearly as much attention, beat him, it'd be very embarrassing. So, congratulations, Eric. You did what you were supposed to do.
I did what I was. Listen, I host a show, a college football show on CBS Sports Network this fall. I better. Nonetheless, Shane, you kept me close.
Eric, listen, man. Next time you and Shane got to get me in there for the pick'ems, man, because I do it with my family every week, and it's one of my pride and joys is figuring out who's going to be that upset. So
yeah, we did an upset special every week. So yeah, well, absolutely next season for sure.
You'll be a frequent guest in the fall with us. I can already tell it's been a great spot.
Hey, Eric, before we get into it, I got to ask you, Victor, because I mentioned when we started talking, 08 is my favorite ever Territorial Cup game because I feel like it was like a decade of frustration just kind of lifted. Finally getting back to a bowl game. Mike Thomas's punt return for touchdown is my favorite play. And then the next year, I was actually in the stands. You actually see me raising my arms when Alex Andejas, no one remembers this now because of what happened the following year, but when Alex Andejas kicked the game-winning field goal. But any favorite Territorial Cup memory for you?
Yeah, I would probably say it was my redshirt freshman year being it was either my redshirt freshman year or freshman year. My first time being in Tempe. And I was not playing, but my favorite thing was talking noise to the fans. And it was just like, because, you're new, you know about the rivalry, but this is your first time seeing like it up close and personal. And so I just remember fans were crazy in Tempe talking noise, and I was just as crazy. And so much so that the fans of ASU were laughing as I was ripping people apart who were talking stuff, and I could making eye contact with this person, taking them down one by one. So
I remember a lot of the U of A players I talked to mentioned that there used to be at Sun Devil Stadium this fence that all the visiting players would have to walk by, and all the ASU fans would line up and just yell stuff.
Yes, echo. Yep. And nothing was off limits or out of bounds with that. And so I think of that, and then I'd probably say in terms of play. My boy Mike Turner getting after they blocked the punt, him recovering it, or Orlando Vargas.
Orlando Vargas, blocked the punt. Yeah, blocked the punt. Yeah,
yes, blocked the punt.
I think, and then I think you're thinking of Mike Turner. I think I want to say he recovered the muff. From Kyle Williams at the end of the game.
Yes, exactly. And I was just talking to Kyle Williams today a little bit. Funny enough. So we always talk noise about the rivalry, but that recovery was amazing.
Yeah.
Vargas with the block. And then I think the other one, though, is Geno Crump. Because we always would, in the locker room, we would always talk about these scenarios, and we would go, duel in the desert, 4th and 13. What you're going to do. And so to see Geno Crump come alive in that game, man, was just unbelievable because he's He's not the most unlikely hero, but he's a guy that you didn't expect to be the guy making plays that game, and he really did. So I'd say
I want to ask you one more Territorial Cup question. Your last year was 2010, which is arguably the most painful loss in Arizona and I've been going to games for 20 years, or 25 years. It's no doubt, if I've ever left a stadium in my life and wanted to cry, that was it.
Yep.
What was the locker room like? Can you kind of? I've never asked anyone this. Can you kind of like?
He's not going to come back now, Eric. You get.
Yes, I remember the locker room. It was, man, because so much goes into these games. I will say, I don't know if you watched the game earlier this year, but you could say the locker room was similar to what Debo with the 49ers did when kicker and holder earlier this season. They had missed this, like, I think it was an extra point or something, and he had revved up the special teamers. Are like, you got one damn job, like, on national TV, right? And I feel like, to your point of the sadness of that was just so crazy, man. And yeah, it was.
I remember being in the stands and just like, I remember, and that was no one remembers it now because of what happened afterwards, but that was a great last minute drive by Nick Foles right down the field.
Got to go for two.
David Douglas. Well, no, I'm not talking about in overtime. I'm talking about in the regulation.
Go for two in a game like
that.
When
a tie game, come on,
go for the win.
Watch this, Eric. You know who went for the win? It's the guy that you mentioned earlier, Jed Fish, in the bowl game, and the commentators are like, "Oh, we like this." And I always say this. I'm like, "Hey, in football, I want to win by making a stop defensively. I don't want to make hey, we threw the ball and somehow he dropped it and now we've lost. If we can kick the extra point, I'm like, nope. It's just
but Victor, I'm gonna throw this at you. For Jed Fish, last year in 2023 against USC, when they had a chance to go for the win, you're gonna have to play overtime, especially when you get into the fluky 2-point conversions with these rules. When you go for the win in these games where it's back and forth and you don't think your defense can stop anybody.
Well, I agree. It's just like it was tied at the time. I'm talking about the end of regulation, Eric. This isn't before he missed an extra point. I understand if you're saying the second one, sure.
Yeah,
but okay. I do remember being in the stands and just thinking, this game isn't over yet.
And watch this. The people who go for two, to your credit, and two, because I know what Eric's alluding to in terms of the mindset with this. Yeah. Do you have to have a surefire 2-point play? And I'm going to tell you right now, there are very few programs in the country that actually have surefire 2-point plays. Because for me personally, I'm a fan of, hey, if we're going for 2-point, it better be some type of misdirection and not the sprint, roll out right, hope that the slot beats his guy so I can throw it to the outside and catch on the one. I'm like, no, we need some type of sleight of hand, like
Boise State, Statue of Liberty.
Yes. Yeah. And the reason why is, right, because you're like, hey, it needs to be surefire where if someone makes a play, we can all go, damn, we can't believe this dude snuffed that out. And there's these coaches are too nervous and too going with the wave anti Dan Campbell's of the world, not going to go for it on first down, to draw up a play and go, okay, we're going to do this. They're like, nope, we'll go to 8 overtimes.
Yeah, but you go back to the 1984 national championship game. Tom Osborne down 31-30 against Miami. He goes for 2 in the win. And I talked to a few Nebraska guys that were on the team. I used to work for one of them, Bill Lewis, who's a backup center, ended up playing the NFL. And I said, did anyone on that team get upset that Osborne went for 2? And he said, not one of us. They all appreciated that he took a shot and played for a national championship instead of tying, because they didn't have overtime at that point.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not anti. I'm just telling you that I'm like, do these coaches get paid a lot of money? And to your point, I wish they would go for 2 more. Yeah. But they don't have the surefire plays because most of these coordinators are copycats, right? So they're doing. I mean, you remember 7 years ago when everyone was running the pistol, right? Mm-hmm. How does everyone run the pistol? Like these dudes have 8 months of an off season and they don't have nothing they can draw. No, they're gonna go with what's surefire, because if you run something weird and it doesn't work, you probably don't have the bandwidth to get hired somewhere else.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about it is someone noted on X that, and I agree with this, that Jed Fish overall very good play caller, but when you need one play to win the game, he's just not the guy.
Dreadful.
Yeah,
dreadful.
I thought that was a good point.
Yeah. Yep, I would agree.
That was an impromptu 2-point conversion talk. That's the fun of Wildcat Country, Victor. We just get into, we go off tangents. This is what it is.
That's the best part. We just shoot the breeze.
Yep. Let's get to college football playoff picks. People are waiting for picks here. All right, Shane, the Orange Bowl, Thursday night. We got Notre Dame's a 2.5-point favorite over Penn State. Who you got?
Yeah, I was stubborn and stuck with my preseason pick of Oregon against Georgia, and I wish I hadn't. But got to go with Notre Dame. I mean, Penn State's been good. I think Notre Dame's been better. I mean, you got to grade Notre Dame on the curve because they're facing a backup quarterback. But even with that, they're number one in the country in takeaways. I think that's going to be the difference. I think Penn State's outclassed both teams that they're definitely better than at this point. I think Notre Dame is probably the second best team left in the field at this point. Maybe not in the country, but in the 4-team field. So give me Notre Dame.
All right, Victor, are you agreeing with Shane, or are you taking Penn State to pull the minor upset?
Pull the minor upset. Yeah, I mean, well, like they said, you said 2.5?
2.5.
Yeah, I mean, here's where I think the difference of the game goes, and I'm going to go the opposite and pick Penn State because I'm going to believe in that tight end 44 that he is going to be the difference maker in the game. And if he's not, you can know why, and then it will be Notre Dame. But I'm going to say my pick is with Penn State, and I think they're going to find a way to get that man the football.
Tyler Warren, yep, first-round pick coming up in April, no doubt about that. Very impressive in the Fiesta Bowl. However, Notre Dame, I picked him to go to the championship game before the playoff. I'm 8-0 in playoff picks, straight up, Shane. I said exactly. So I'm going to stick. Notre Dame is going to make me 9-0. So I'm going to roll with that and pick them to win this game. 19-14, low-scoring, ugly game. Yeah, low-scoring, ugly.
He gave us a score too. Look at him.
I give scores for everything. Come on, this is what I do here. All right, let's go. Let's go to Texas and Ohio State now. Coming into the playoff, I picked Texas to win it all, and I had the Longhorns winning this game 21-20. Shane, Texas has not played all that well. Where do you stand with this one? Ohio State is giving 6 points in Arlington.
Gotta go with Ohio State. I think, and I mentioned this to Matt Moreno when we weren't recording. I thought Ohio State Oregon was the de facto national championship game. Ohio State, I actually thought they were going to get punched in the mouth by Tennessee, and I was completely wrong. I thought that loss to Michigan was going to demoralize them, and it's just gone the other way. I think they're a team on a mission. Texas got outclassed by ASU. If you just look at the stats, you would have thought ASU would have won in terms of yardage, time of possession. If that Texas team shows up, or even the one against Clemson shows up against Ohio State, Buckeyes win by at least 2 touchdowns. So give me Ohio State.
All right, Victor, 6 points. There's a lot of – I know the Buckeyes have looked great, but Texas doesn't usually get blown out here. Do you think the Longhorns can keep it close, or do you think Shane's right and it's going to be a blowout?
Man, if you go based off of what we saw from last week, it's an easy to pick the blowout, and it's easy to pick Ohio State. But I laughed, and I talked to a colleague earlier today that said, man, I think that Texas is going to find a way because, one, the red zone defense is crazy, but two, I think that they have a better I think that their front four is going to be a lot better than what Oregon was able to bring to the table. And so my question is, do I believe that Sark is going to play Manning? Because I've seen enough of Ewers to go, if you play that guy, you're not going to be in the game. And what I saw against ASU, he's willing to die with Ewers. So I am going to go Ohio State. He's not going to put Manning in the game, and I think he's willing to ride Ewers all the way out, because when things were tight, I thought he was going to put him in against ASU, and he opted not to, which makes me believe there's no way he's going to play Manning against Ohio State. So Ohio State.
I hope that you guys are right, and I think Ohio State will win the game. But 6 points is a lot of points to give, especially in Texas. I think it's a closer game. I'm going to say Ohio State 24, Texas 20, and the Longhorns cover the 6. I picked Ohio State at the start of the year, Shane.
Yeah, you're gonna let it roll, that parlay roll, because you got a lot of money riding on this.
I do, from my $16 parlay that pays $3,500 if Ohio State wins it all. Let's put it in.
Now you can cash out now and get like $1,200 or something like that.
They're giving me almost $1,500. I'm letting it ride. The Buckeyes are the best team in college football, and you guys picking them made me feel more confident. Either way, I think Texas keeps it close. Hey, Victor, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute blast, and we're definitely going to have you on often, so get ready for it.
Yep, sounds good, brothers. Thanks for having me. Appreciate y'all's time.
Want to thank Victor Yates. Want to thank the professor, Matt Moreno. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.
Bear down, baby.